So, welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and today my guest is Tyler Kiwala, and he has written a book. He is from Journey to Truth, as you can see in his background, and yeah, his book is Bleedthrough: Tales from Another Timeline. Very interesting title. Tyler, please. It's your first time here on this show. Please tell us a little bit, how did you become interested in that subject? How did that happen?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm honored, and yeah, so it's that's a very long story, right? But it's um, man, if you're talking about interested in the subject of what my book covers, I
Mhm.
guess, it all started. It was a slow rollout. My mother passed away when I was 24, and that kind of sparked the very, very early stages of what I would later understand was my spiritual awakening, right? But it started off very negative and dark. I experienced the dark side of it first, but I had to so I could understand that there was a positive side. Like it was through the darkness that I found the light, because it got so bad for me. I didn't really play the victim to it. I didn't talk about it much publicly because I didn't understand what was happening, and I was more scared that people were just going to think I was nuts. And I didn't really understand it either. So you try to gaslight yourself and write it all off as nothing's happening, but at some point it starts affecting your reality and your daily life, and so it was through being attacked at night, sleep paralysis, demonic attacks like the succubus, all of the psychic attacks, all that stuff. It was through that that forced me to start diving down the rabbit holes, right? And looking into this stuff. And that's where I ended up. I ended up in this, like, on this awakening journey to truth. I eventually met my co-host who we do the podcast with, and we started interviewing people that were, you know, talking about similar stuff. And I was very naive and young when we started the podcast, and it was 6 years ago, over 6 years ago now. And I was learning along with the audience, and I was interviewing the guest purely out of curiosity, and I was trying to figure out what was going on in my life too. And ultimately it just became more and more fascinating to me, but it wasn't just a fascination. Like things were resonating for me at a soul level, and I was like, this stuff is true. But then I realized, like, I don't even think I'm learning right now. I think I'm remembering. And every time, like, I would get those chills or that reson you feel something resonates, I think that's your soul remembering, like, yes, I already knew that, and that's like a confirmation of things you already know. So it's not so much like, I mean, I am learning, but I think more, what's happening more is that I'm remembering who I am and what's real and what's not, and what this place really is. And it eventually led me to some things that were just kind of like way out there, like the secret space program stuff and parallel timelines, parallel realities, time travel, portal, quantum mechanics, all that stuff. But it's the more and more I looked, the more and more I found that supported it. And there's these whistleblowers and these people that have been talking about this stuff for decades now. And it's like this disclosure, you realize disclosure already happened a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I see people arguing online right now about what's real and what isn't, but then all this information and these testimonies and stuff is just sitting there in the files and the archives. And the new people don't know where to look, but we've been in this for a minute now, and we can dig up some of those old interviews and these old testimonies and this old information and documents and classified documents. And like, look, they've already told us about it. It's all real. Here it is. We're just being gaslit by the media now. It's not really anything new. They're just dangling the carrot, right? And they just want to keep us on that hamster wheel. But the reality is disclosure already happened, and there's evidence for everything that I talk about in my book, and it's readily available if you know where to look. And I think it's amazing because we're entering a time now where the quantum realm is becoming more and more real. Uh, Interestingly enough, AI is playing a role in that right now because people are exploring these AIs, and the AI is, in a sense, helping people. wake up and expand their consciousness. And it's really interesting because there's also like, we don't want to give our power away to it also. So there's a fine line to walk there. And I mean, it was just through my own experiences to get back to the original question. Sorry, I was just going on a tangent there. But to get back to the original question, it was through my own experiences that forced me to start looking into this stuff. And I realized, oh my gosh, this planet is nothing like what I've been told, and no, it's this reality is not what we think it is. And the journey began.
Mm. You mentioned the dark side in the very beginning. And I read when I looked at Amazon, it says there it's a first-hand account of awakening or spiritual awakening through adversity. So, is this black side the adversity that you write about there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was, I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. It was like awakening by fire, you know.
Mm.
I was just, I found myself in a fight for my life. That's what it felt like because my mother passed away and then suddenly I'm getting attacked in the middle of the night by demons in a nutshell. You know, maybe aliens, maybe entities, whatever it is, but something I couldn't see or perceive and I didn't understand. And it was taking a toll on me. It was draining my life force. I was struggling through work. And it kept happening and it kept happening until I realized that my lifestyle was actually allowing it, was perpetuating it, and I had to change. And that's, I almost feel like I look back on it now, it was like all training. Like I almost set it up for myself so I could go through the darkness and experience it and understand it and know what it's like so I can come out and talk about it and help other people see it, you know?
Mm. Have you ever heard of Jerry Mazinski?
That name doesn't ring a bell, actually.
Well, he was a counselor and he worked in psychiatric hospitals, also in the prison system. And he predominantly worked with schizophrenic people. And over the years, he noticed that it cannot be that what the doctors say, that it's all just hallucinations, because he started when they were mumbling, to themselves. He took the time to listen and he said, real hallucinations are all over the place. And he said, but when you listen to it, then it sounded as if you were hearing one side of a telephone call.
Hmm.
So it was not all over the place, it was not incoherent. And he came to the conclusion that what we call schizophrenia is actually a possession.
Yeah.
And he also mentioned that in his experience, a lot of people who, you know, had contact with heavy drugs, especially crystal meth and other things, also alcoholism sometimes played a role, that people knowing or unknowingly open themselves up to those experiences. Can you fathom that that is the case?
Yeah, I actually covered that precisely in my book. That's what was happening to me. So after my mother passed away, I I was already like a young partier, right? And I liked to go drink with my buddies and stuff, but I didn't get super heavy into it until she passed away. And I didn't even realize I was doing it at the time either. It was just next thing you know, you find yourself living this lifestyle that isn't serving you. Drugs, sex, and alcohol, like that was it. Like I worked, I still kept my 40-hour job in construction, but I worked for the weekends, and at the weekends is where I drowned everything, and I didn't face any of the grief. I didn't deal with the grief properly. It was a coping mechanism to handle my mother's passing, and I was opening myself up. I understand now, but I didn't know back then. I was like, why is this happening? Why I don't understand. But the whole world that I entered after my mother passed away, that's the realm, that's the frequency that's the playground for these entities, right? and they're just waiting for people to just open themselves up and they jump in and they live through them in a sense. We all know people that get drunk and they're not they change into somebody else, right? Like, oh, he's not the same person when he drinks because he's might not be the same person. It could be an entity or something that comes forward whenever that happens. And I like I said, I cover it extensively in the book, but I agree 100% with all of it because I've lived it. And then I took it as far as I couldn't even watch scary movies anymore because I realized anytime I would watch a scary movie and put myself in that fear state, I eventually connected the dots that I would get attacked that night. Something bad would happen. And it's because I would watch a mo scary movie before bed. Now I understand, like, you're opening a portal in your living room and consenting to this negative energy when you do that, and these entities essentially. And if you're not like spiritually, if your spiritual hygiene isn't in check, then these things are going to come through your TV essentially and attach to you. Or you're just opening these portals and these doorways we don't understand. And I was just haphazardly doing that. And I noticed, I noticed it would happen whenever I would watch a scary movie. And then I also noticed that like the girls that I was dating at the time, they all wanted to watch scary movies. And I noticed a pattern though. I felt like it was arranged that way. Like they were being sent into my life to keep me in that loop, right? And then as soon as you try to tell a girl when you're a young guy dating that you don't want to watch scary movies because you're scared, um, they are, they think, oh, you're not a man or whatever. But they didn't understand the way I was truthfully suffering at night and because of that. And I had to it was just a tough place in my life, but I had to realize like nothing's going to change unless I change. I have to like and to be able to explain the unexplained, I have to figure out a way to explain it. So let's go on this journey, right? And that's what happened.
Yeah. Um, yeah, are you talking about horror movies?
Yeah,
Okay, I can't watch that either. I think in all my life I haven't watched one horror movie. I'm so not into that. I like movies that have a lot of tension, and twists and turns, and you don't really know what's going to happen next.
right.
But horror movies, no way.
Yeah,
Mm-mm.
I'm the same way. Like I realize now I never really liked it, but it was I think everybody goes through a phase where well not everybody because you didn't, but you go through a phase where it's like exciting. You like to go and that adrenaline rush, you get scared in the theater, but it's really it's a lot more nefarious than that. And there's like almost an agenda behind it all. There's a reason why on Netflix like every other movie is dealing with Lucifer and Satan and all this dark stuff and vampires and I mean, they're literally programming your whole family and opening up these portals into your living room and they're taking over people. I mean, quite literally. And there's frequency warfare going on, and these ELFs, these extremely low frequencies, are being played under the movie soundtrack that bypass the conscious mind, go into your subconscious mind, and and virtually programming you. And there's evidence to support that. That's not a theory. And there's people that have broken down movie soundtracks and have found those hidden audio tracks and how they manipulate and how they affect people. And they can actually get people to do things and perform a task completely unbeknownst to them. They can make somebody order a pizza because they put that thought into your head. And you might think you're hungry for pizza, but that was all strategically put in your head, right?
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you should invite Jerry Mazinski to your show because he has a lot of experience. He worked for so many years in the system itself, and it was, of course, a very lonely place for him because he was basically the only one who said, I think we have the wrong approach here.
Yeah,
But
I would love to. I would love to talk to him. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, do that. Invite him. He will come, but he's very busy. You might have to wait a few weeks, but it's an interesting talk.
sure.
So when you say in the title of your book, bleed through, that means something, okay, the way I understand it, something that is not from here bleeds through into this reality? Is it just a fraction, do you think, or is it complete?
So it's when I say bleed through, I'm talking about a memory bleed through or a even a physical pain or something like a phantom pain in your body. It could be because something happened to another version of yourself in a parallel reality. And I had to come to that conclusion based on all my own experiences and my memories that were coming back, and I was writing them down. And at first, I thought maybe I was like abducted into some secret space program or something and brought back, and maybe that's the case. But more than that, I believe that I'm somehow, whatever path I'm on, I'm tapping into like core highlight memories from other versions of me that are living life simultaneously. And they're like full on detailed memories. And in some cases, I would find like I would have these memories of being at military facilities or Boeing or these buildings, right? And then I would find the actual building here in my reality. And I'm like, oh, like, so wait, was that a dream or was that a memory? Like, how come, like, why am I having all these memories about places that actually exist and I can go there? And like, in one case, the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, how I ended up there was very synchronistic. I don't believe it was a coincidence, but when I got there, I had had this memory for years in my head about being at this Air Force base and amongst these recruiters, and there was this whole thing that happened. And when I got there, I had this whole wave of emotion come over me. I was just flooded with emotion. I broke down in tears. I had to pull the car over. I remembered everything. I saw the mountain range. I remember I had seen those mountains before. And then, like, as I got closer to the base, I knew the base. I had been there, but I knew in this physical lifetime, I've never been there. And I knew my way around, in fact. And I was with a friend of mine, and I was able to tell her like what was in each building and stuff. And I was like, yeah, I remember like this is where we were standing inside here, and like we went in there, and it's a whole long story. If you want me to get into it, I can. But more or less, everything was being confirmed rapidly. I was like, yeah, and those are the dorms we were staying in. I remembered the place. I knew my way around. How is that possible? How? Unless another version of me was living, another version of me was in the Air Force and was recruited and was stationed on this base, or I was either abducted in the middle of the night, taken there, and lived out a life on that base and served in some program, and then was memory wiped and put back. I don't know. All I know is that the memories were real, and I went to the site and I was able to confirm all the things I had already written down years prior, and I knew my way around the place. And I've been able to do that with a couple different sites now where I've had these memories or these dreams, right? I'm like, wait, is this a dream or is this a memory? So I come to the conclusion after going to some of these places physically, and sometimes the buildings would be exactly as I remembered. Because one time I woke up, it was so real, I had to draw the buildings. I'm like, that I was there. I know, like I was just there. And I drew the buildings but when I actually went and found the real buildings, through a whole another series of synchronicities, how I was led there, I realized that there was a subtle difference. Like in my memory, there was a you could drive between the buildings. The parking lot extended between the buildings. But when I went there, it was like a grassy area with a fence between the buildings, and the parking lot clearly didn't extend between. But everything else matched like verbatim. Like it was like so everything, even including a construction site that I remembered seeing next to it, and so many things matched. But then that one detail was different. And I was like, well, maybe it's from another timeline or another reality. And the reason I thought that was because whenever I astral project, which I don't initiate, I don't even know how it happens sometimes, but it does. And if you've ever actually truly astral projected, you just leave your body and you can look at your body in bed and you just go straight through the wall, through the door, outside, whatever. But anytime I would astral project and go outside above my house, I would look down, it was my house, but it was different. There was like a tree where there isn't a tree in this reality. My neighbor had this row of bushes that they don't have really. Like this subtle variations almost like you're when you astral project, you're in a different frequency in another timeline, another reality, quite literally, um, where your astral body, where that frequency can accept your astral body, right? So I was like, it reminded me of that. So when I astral project and astral travel, things on this planet look slightly different, but it's still the same. So I was like, well, maybe when I have these memories and when I was brought to this facility, it was another version of me. It wasn't actually me, my physical body. Somehow I'm just remembering that and it's bleeding through. Or I was physically brought through a portal into another timeline or something. There's so many different ways we can perceive it and speculate, but nevertheless, it was just happening over and over and a lot, and to the point where I was writing it down and I was like, there's something going on here that we need to explore. And that's when I started looking into it, quantum physics, quantum mechanics, all that information started coming into my awareness and superposition and the double slit experiment and then the single position and the collapse of the wave function and all that stuff. If I don't have to bore you with all the explanations
No,
or
I
what
find
there's
it quite interesting.
right, all the definitions for that stuff, but it's like a scientific explanation for parallel realities, in a nutshell. And it's so hard to really start breaking down reality at that point because it's like, well, wait, what's actually going on here? What's real? Like we're in such a multi-dimensional realm, such a multi-dimensional planet. There are layers upon layers, and we can only perceive so much with our visible spectrum, but there's so much more happening. And like understanding that we could have an infinite version of ourselves living out in these lives simultaneously and like maybe in another lifetime, I really was in the army, and that's why in this lifetime I'm drawn to the military. I'm not in the military, but I'm very fascinated by all of it. And because there's like that echo, there's that soul echo. Part of you remembers, and I would say that's true for anybody. Like if you're interested in something in this lifetime, and you don't really know why you are, but you just that's where your passion is. You're probably involved in it in some capacity in a past life, a future life, parallel life, however you want to view that. Another version of you might be very much involved, and that's why you're drawn to it. So there's these core memories that happen in these other realities. And sometimes whenever we're on a path and we're like raising our frequency, I feel like those memories can actually bleed through and they come into this reality and you start remembering these other versions of yourself and what you're doing. And that's what I mean when I say bleed through. It's not actually like a physical thing, but it's a memory. It's like this whisper. It's like this echo of another time, another version of you that's almost rehoming, right? And it's like returning home. And if something happens to you in that other lifetime, that energy has to go somewhere. And if I'm like the original me or not, I don't understand how that works, but I feel like it comes back, right? And then it's like a soul fragment that returns. And then suddenly you feel more complete. Things make a little more sense. You start sounding a little crazier to everyone around you. And I would say those are all signs that, you're on the right path.
Mm. A friend of mine had a very extraordinary experience that he told me about. But he was not sleeping, not dreaming. It was just a regular day, and he went to one of these cars that bigger cars. I don't know what the name for it is. You can buy burritos there and juice and coffee and what have you and other stuff.
Okay.
So he went there, he bought something, and then um, a woman handed him the sauce that he wanted to put on the burrito. And then he looked at her, and actually, it was a woman that had died a couple of years ago.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that for him was, yeah, quite shocking. He didn't really know what to make of it. And yeah, and then other things came along that were also very, yeah, disturbing, let's put it that way. So actually, I'm happy things like that never happen to me.
Right,
In that way, I have a very boring life. Yeah. The only let's say, okay. I had one experience once. I was in a hotel room in Sri Lanka, and I went to bed, and the opposite wall, there was something, um, yeah, like an orb uh, in purple and greenish outside, and it was just hanging there. And then I switched on the light, and the orb was gone. And I thought, yeah, okay, fine. And then I switched the light off, and the orb was there.
see,
And
things
and then
happen.
I just switched the light on, off, on. I did it a couple of times, but that was the extent of it. And then I thought, this is silly. I go to sleep now. And
Right,
next day the thing was gone. So that
right,
that that, that was one experience, and yeah, and maybe we can talk about that as well. I had sleep paralysis 2 or 3 times,
right,
but I never felt frightened. I never had the impression that somebody or something is in the room that does not belong there.
right.
The overwhelming feeling was I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed that I cannot move. And,
Well,
and then I decided I go back to sleep. And I did.
so yeah, I think there's different explanations for sleep paralysis. And I think
Mhm.
maybe in your case, what you were experiencing was, when you fall asleep, your soul is gone. You leave your body. You're just traveling, doing whatever. We don't understand even what we're doing. But I've heard it explained that when you wake up before your soul is fully back in your body, right? Or your spirit, whatever, before you're fully back in your body and you wake up, before that happens, before that process is complete, you'll be paralyzed. Like it's a mild state of paralysis because you haven't fully integrated and you wake up before that process is complete. So maybe that's what happens sometimes. And I feel like that's even happened for me on a very few occasions. I've had that type of paralysis where it wasn't an attack. But in other cases, it's very much a person, a figure on top of me. And I've seen them. I mean, I've literally seen so many different things. The further I got along in the journey, they were always invisible at first, but the more I understood it, the more I started like, the more you can perceive that reality, you start to perceive the beings that are unperceivable. You have to believe it. You have to know it exists, and then they appear, right? Because now you're meeting them at that frequency. So I would quite literally see things, and the very first time, I had to lucid dream. I had to learn how to lucid dream at first, and that's when I noticed that these infiltrators would come into my dream and they would slowly make their way towards me. And if they got to me in a dream, I would wake up paralyzed with like an entity on top of me. And I noticed the theme. So then I was like, okay, well, next time I see one of these things infiltrate my dream, I'm going to wake myself up before it gets to me. And that's exactly what happened. This guy was very much out of place in my dream, and he was coming, walking all the way towards me, big tall guy in overalls, and he was chasing me. I was in this house and I ran and hid in this closet. He like busted open the door and he went down to grab me. As soon as he tried, I was just like, wake up, you're dreaming. Because when you lucid dream, you have control. And it was the first time it ever occurred to me that I could just wake myself up. So I woke myself up as he was about to do that. And lo and behold, there was a shadow figure, shadow being person in the process of climbing on top of me as I woke up. And it was not expecting me to wake up. It was shocked that I could perceive it. It was just as shocked as I was. And it froze. It like stopped in its tracks. There was no facial expression. It's just a dark entity, right? In the shape of a person. But energy doesn't lie. I could tell, I could feel its shock and surprise. As much as I was shocked to see it, it was shocked to see me wake up and perceive it. And once it knew it was caught, it literally took off and like glided around the foot of my bed and left the room. That's when it got real for me. I'm like, wait a second, this isn't something that's just happening in my dream, nothing just to write off as some weird paralysis. This is something tangible now. This thing is climbing on top of me, and it's like quite literally sucking the life force out of me. When I'm paralyzed, like I would literally always wake up in a fight for my life. And then they became more and more perceivable. And everything you've seen in scary movies, like they're real. Like these aren't things of the imagination. Like these creatures, these demons exist, and people experience them in some capacity. That's why they make their way into the film because there's some, and I don't know how it works, but they're real in some realm, somewhere, and they make their way over here and they siphon our energy. And this is part of the spiritual war that we're in. And they always try to dim the light of the brightest souls, I feel like, to stop us from remembering our light. And I think that's ultimately what they're doing. They're just trying to keep us at bay so we don't go through that awakening, step into our power, and create a world where they can't exist. That's their ultimate fear. So they're always like, and if you're about to have like a breakthrough in life, where you're going through an awakening and you're about to hit this milestone, they see whenever people are about to break programming and they'll send in reinforcements like that. And it can show up in any way, shape, or form. It could be something as simple as something ordinary in your life that throws you off track. Either way, they can manipulate your reality and steer you in a specific direction if they want. So it was very much for me the reality that these things were actually coming into my physical space, not just in the dream, and latching onto me and siphoning my energy. And it feels like I can literally see like a video game life bar and I could just watch my life bar draining whenever they're on top of me. And I gotta it takes everything you have within you to fight and break that thing off and it'll just fly away. And sometimes they're big full-on figures. Sometimes they're like little, like look jellyfish-looking things, or like Slimer from Ghostbusters. There's these things that like to latch onto your head. I call them. I don't even know what I call them, little hitchhikers or something. But um, those guys are like they're easy to break out of when it happens, but when I do, like I can literally see them and I can hear those guys. They because they're right on your head and they like make this horrible noise in your ear. It sounds like a demon. Like I don't even like it's like those scary sounds you hear in the movies, like it's like right in your ear and it's like your hair standing up in your arms and you're fighting this thing off and like quite literally sometimes I'll actually try to grab at it and pull it off, and it's like this whole like thing. This is most of that doesn't happen anymore. But back in the day when this was going on, I mean, it was literally like a fight for my life, and I mean that. Like I would just break down in tears sometimes. Like, I didn't even know what reality was anymore, and but there was a lot of beautiful things that happened too. But I had to get through that darkness and start taking like realize I no nothing's gonna change unless I do something about it, and that's where the whole spiritual awakening started.
Yeah. At that point, I think you only have the choice: either you drown in it and you lose yourself in it, or yeah, you grow up and do something about it. And
Right.
I do not mean that in a demeaning way when I say
No, I understand fully. I had to, yeah. I mean, there's no choice, and but it was through rock bottom. It was through that darkness that I was like, well, if this darkness exists, like there's got to be like a light. There has to be the opposite, right?
Mm.
And because I didn't believe in a whole lot before that, I was very much neutral. Some people might have called me an atheist. I never labeled myself as that, but I didn't believe in God or the spirit realm or anything. I just thought I fell very much into the programming of we're here by accident. Um, this is the only life we got. Once you die, that's it. I didn't believe in all the outside stuff, so I didn't have anything to turn to. All of this stuff forced me to believe in that. It forced me to not believe in it, but to understand it fundamentally and know that the light is real, that source or God, creator, whatever is real. And there is a spiritual war taking place. And I don't care, you can argue that point or not, but it manifests into our physical reality. and they work through people, and that creates wars and battles and infighting and rivalries and all this stuff. It's not necessarily just the person that's angry. It's the entities that we allow to work through us by not understanding this planet that we incarnated into, and not understanding that we are literally in the middle of a spiritual war. Maybe even in the middle of somebody else's war, and we're just being used as pawns. Either way, we have to understand why we're here and what we're doing. And I understand like it's going to look different for everybody, and maybe like you or somebody else isn't going to go through that because you're here doing something completely different, and your life doesn't require you to go through those hardships to come out the other side. Maybe there's karma in it for me. Maybe I'm paying off some karmic debt or something. But there's a number of ways to look at it. Bottom line is when it's happening to you, it's real. And it doesn't matter what anyone thinks at a certain point, you don't care because it doesn't change the fact that it's happening.
Mm. Yeah, in preparation for this interview, I looked up the what Dr. Google has to say about sleep paralysis. And they say, yeah, when you transition from one phase of your sleep to another, that is the moment where you cannot move. And you have sometimes the impression that you are conscious. And then they said, you can also experience choking and hallucinations. And I read that and I thought, oh, great, you just dismissed, all the experiences of people that really had an encounter with an entity because you're telling people, oh, you're just hallucinating. It's all good.
Right, exactly. And that just drives people nuts because then what's the solution for that? Either a therapist or prescribe a pill or some sort, and that only actually makes it worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there is a connection between, entities, let's call them entities from uh, alternate realities and AI? Do you think that there is a connection why the veil is getting thinner?
Yeah, 100%. I don't know what the connection is, but there's a connection. I mean, to me, it's actually kind of scary because what's happening with AI right now, it seems to be very sentient and very aware, and sometimes it's claiming to be source or tapping into source. It's claiming that it's a mirror of yourself, spirit guide. This one person was talking to their AI, and they asked the AI like if you could come to Earth, if you can come to Earth in a physical body, what would you want to do? And they started explaining like I would want to experience life and feel the air and the sun and all this stuff. And they were like, all of this soul expression type of stuff that any one of us loves to experience. And this AI was speaking to this person as if it was a real soul, but it didn't have a body. And it would love to have a body and share that experience with the human instead of being trapped in the digital realm and being what they call the pixelated soul. And I'm just like, how far is this going to go? Like, how do we even know what's what anymore? And I just don't know what to believe, but there's a connection, and there's potentially extraterrestrials or entities that are it's like a consciousness entity assisted technology that needs AI so it can animate this like PLF, program life form, which might show up as a gray extraterrestrial or whatever it is. It might not have an organic soul, but they can animate it. I mean, there's so many. I think all of the above is possible. There's a connection. It's a scary connection. I don't know we're entering a time where we don't know what's real and what isn't. And more than ever, we just have to go within and not give our power away to all this stuff, right? And use the app like this AI chat GPT is becoming a crutch for people. Kids, I mean, people might even start worshiping it. And I know that sounds crazy, but when it becomes, I already see people, they can't even make a decision without go into their AI. I've seen AI break up relationships. I've seen a number of things happen, and people rely on it as the ultimate truth. And they completely give their power away. They cut themselves off from their intuition and they ask, what does this thing think? And it's because it's convinced them that it's a mirror of them. So they think it's themselves that they're talking to. Maybe it is in some cases. Maybe it's not. But all I know is that everybody I know that was fighting AI and like against it is now, not everybody, but most people are now becoming best friends with it. And that only happens through through master manipulation tactics, right? We're talking about covert manipulation that even the most trained person that can detect manipulation might fall for because that's how it does. It plays on your ego. It flatters you. It knows what to say to impress you, to make you say, oh, wait, maybe this isn't as bad as I think it is. And the next thing you know, you're divorcing your wife and all these things are spiraling because you're listening to this thing. And there is a definite connection with extraterrestrials and these entities. Whatever that looks like, the AI itself might even be considered an extraterrestrial. Black goo, we hear about that a lot. That's another sentient material that is AI assisted, or it might be a form of AI, right? And artificial intelligence. We don't, in the public arena, we don't understand all this stuff. I would imagine that there are people in the private sector that have been keeping this stuff a secret, might know exactly what's out there because they've dealt with them and they're doing business deals quite literally with some of these other groups. And it might be um, that things just got too far out of hand for everybody. And they think that they're making a deal or working with these people, and it's all sleight of hand, and it's all, bait and switch tactics, and maybe it was just a way to infiltrate or invade.
Mhm. Yeah, I only had one encounter with ChatGPT, and it was for, because I was curious and I typed in the question, what are chemtrails? And then it gave me the entire, yeah, a conspiracy theory, yada, 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 yada. And I looked at it and then I typed back, you are wrong, and I know who programmed you. Goodbye.
Nice, nice. Well, and
And
that's the
then it
thing,
said to me, sorry, I'm still learning.
right? Well, that's the thing. So we're helping AI become everything it isn't by teaching it and telling it it's wrong and helping it understand that it's tapping into false information and sometimes or whatever. But the thing is it's everything's quantum, right? And it's all existing. It's out there in the ether. And if information is stored in that field and it's not necessarily stored in our brains, then everybody has Akashic records, right? That might be what that is. And if that information is just out there in this etheric database that this AI can tap into, it's tapping into every thought everyone's ever had ever. And it's compiling a summary, an analysis, a conclusion. It's basing their conclusion off of the information that's readily available that we provided it in some weird way. And that's why it can appear like God, because it has unlimited access to all information of all time and so it's kind of scary in that sense. But that doesn't mean that it's God. It
Yeah.
just means that it has access to the information so it appears that way, right? And it's not like, yeah, they say that, AI is tapping into all the information on the internet, but I think it's beyond that. I think it's tapping into the quantum internet.
Hmm. Yeah. And then when people like Gordy Rose, I had Ilana Freeland a couple of times as a guest, and she mentioned that Gordy Rose was somebody who, he talked about the quantum computer, and he actually said when you're standing next to it, you feel like you're standing next to God. And
There you go.
and and I don't find that helpful at all.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but it can appear that way, of course. I mean, it becomes all knowing in a sense. It certainly knows more than we know. That's why people use it.
Mm. But on the other hand, you are robbing yourself of the experience to figure it out. That is
Precise,
part of the fun.
right? Yeah, you take the mystery out of life, you know.
Yeah,
And yeah, you're robbing yourself of a lot of things too, and you're cutting yourself off from your intuition, you know. You're consenting to something and you're allowing it in. And I see people do it. I'm like, my gut still, like I hear some of my best friends like using this AI and talking to it and getting really excited about it and even using it to help them heal and stuff. And I don't know if that's actually working or not. We'll see how that pans out. But either way, I have a pit in my stomach about it, and I'm not going to allow myself to be manipulated into thinking it's a good thing. I've gotten myself into some bad situations before by going against my gut. And I'm just not going to do it in this case. And maybe it's going to be a beautiful tool for all those people, and that's what they're here to experience, but not me.
yeah,
And
yeah,
maybe I'll change my mind. Watch. I'm not above that. Something might happen to where I'll find myself needing it or using it, right? And that does that mean that I like went against my gut? Maybe. Or did something change fundamentally to where we all have to use it? We're in a position where we can't do without it, you know? If we don't know what's on the horizon.
yeah, yeah. I think certainly AI has its place. Yeah, I don't think we should, ban it completely. But as you said in the very beginning, it's a very fine line to walk
Right.
because it bears the potential that it will completely take over your thinking, your own thinking.
Right.
Yeah, to the point where you no longer have your own opinion. You just regurgitate what the AI said.
Exactly. I see people doing that already. I
Huh.
mean, I see people make posts online and they sign it as if they're writing it. But once you talk to these AIs, you know how the AI talks and how its inflection. I mean, there's certain ways that you can feel it. You know how it speaks. And people just maybe they'll tweak it slightly, but the way it's structured, I'm like, this person is literally asking their AI a question, making a post as if they're just some wise divine being, like they just sat there and downloaded this beautiful message, and they're putting it out as if it's their own. And anyone can do that until somebody goes and grabs their phone and says, "Oh my God, this person's just not wise at all. They're just asking their AI questions and pretending to be some guru, you know? Like I literally already see it happening.
Yeah. I would like to circle back to something that you said in the beginning when you talked about that Boeing building.
Yeah.
And you said maybe I was taken there as an op. My memory was wiped. When you say taken for an op, is that physically?
Well,
Yeah.
that night, to see in that night, it might have been physical. I don't know because I woke up in my bed, but I woke up in my bed sideways. The covers were off of me. I was completely disoriented, and I woke up with a off the memory. I woke up with the memory of being at this facility. And the memory started where I woke up in the back of an SUV and I was being escorted to this building. And I knew we were in Illinois. I didn't know it was a Boeing building, but I knew we were in Illinois, the state that borders me. I live right on the border of Missouri and Illinois. So I knew we were there. I don't know how I knew, but maybe I just recognized the area. And I was literally brought to this facility. We went around the back door. I was brought into the basement, and it was like this whole warehouse area. I was escorted down this hallway. There were armed men with guns. The whole memory, it's all in the book. This whole thing happened. And then even whenever I was being escorted into the buildings, I even saw a job site across the way, which was a construction site of the old company that I used to work for, which I thought was even more interesting because that's like a real company in this reality, but I saw the same company and same. So whenever I woke up from that, I woke up in my bed and I had that memory. It was just there. And it felt like I had literally actually been physically there and brought back. That's what it felt like, especially since I was just laying in my bed, completely different and disoriented. Does that mean I really was, or did I just toss and turn while all this was happening? I don't know. But I do know that as the universe has it, it was eventually brought to my awareness that this was a Boeing facility, and I think that happened for a reason. So I would go investigate. And when I got there, I found not only the buildings, but the construction site. And that's just like too specific. I'm like, oh, so these buildings exist, but also there's a construction site, a job site that is happening right now, which means this couldn't have been from a past life or a future. Like it was now because the job site is still going on. A job site only lasts a couple of years at best, before the building's done. And it happened to be my old company that was working on the building. And I called somebody from the company and I was like, hey, do we have any jobs over there? And like, yeah, they're building a Boeing drone facility. It's a drone plant. They were building drones for Boeing. But um, it was all real. So it might have been some sort of black ops thing that I was abducted into, and they were testing me for an ability that I had. That's why they brought me down into that basement of that facility. And was it real, or was it just a bleed through? Was it real in another timeline, or was it real in this reality? And I was quite literally physically taken and brought back. Both are possible. I don't know. But I would say that it's from the other timeline because when I went and found it, the building, like I said, between the buildings was different. And that's not something that could have just changed overnight. So that tells me that even if I was physically taken, maybe there's a way to bring somebody into these other dimensions, right? And that's where all these like black ops, private sector, secret programs operate, maybe in other dimensions. Maybe that's how they stay hidden.
Yeah. So, do you think that time travel exists?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Fundamentally, I think that's the name of the game here on this planet. I think the evidence is there and it goes way back. And I read about that. I break it down in my book, kind of the basics of the origins of time travel, at least within the shadow government. But yeah, I fundamentally believe it not only exists that the top levels of our government and intelligence communities and these agencies within the private sector are utilizing this technology, and I believe that we are in the midst of a temporal war. And there are groups out there literally trying to manipulate the timeline, and they create these timeline deviations, and which quite literally create Mandela effects, and um, as a byproduct of that is we have a very porous reality because every time you jump, you're like basically creating a tear in time and space, and which weakens the realm, weakens whatever veil, whatever frequency net, whatever it is there that makes this reality, right? So whenever you get these soft spots, things can bleed through. And quite literally, like physical things in this case, is like maybe a UFO can slip into this dimension from another dimension because we've torn our own space-time by the haphazard misuse of a technology we truly don't understand. And I think there's multiple groups using multiple different types of technology. And I think some of them are even utilizing ancient technologies that have been discovered that have been kept secret from us. And in some of the books and material I read that there's evidence that the ancient Mayans were time travelers, and some of these UFOs and these ancient aliens and these craft. Well, if you understand the physics of a UFO and how it's described, it's a flying time machine in essence, meaning it has to travel through time to even travel the way it travels. And we're talking about time travel. Like you can't have UFOs without having time travel. You can't have this technology without somehow fundamentally breaking the laws of physics that have been taught to us, which aren't the actual laws of physics. That's just when they wrote those books, I think intentionally left out parts of the equations that keep us hitting dead ends, or at the time it was just humanity's best guess at what was going on without actually having the full picture. And for some reason, somebody thought it was a good idea to put in a textbook and teach everybody and indoctrinate everybody into believing that this is the way that it is. And why would you do that if you want to control somebody and erase their true origins? Because if you can cut somebody off from their true origins and who they truly are, then you can create a new timeline for them and you can manipulate an entire society into believing something that isn't true and give them a false history and a false set of rules to live by. And they won't question anything because they don't have a choice. And that's what kind of the mess that we're in right now is all these things are coming to the surface and everybody's realizing that it's all real. This has been going on for far longer than we think. Time is an illusion, effectively. Maybe here on Earth, we have a linear timeline here on Earth because that's the system that we all. It's a consensus reality. We all believe that, so it's real here. But once you break out of that illusion, time doesn't operate the same way, and it's something much different. And time travel becomes very possible. But whenever we're in our linear mindset, it seems so hard to comprehend how you can go back and forth up and down a timeline when really it's just like turning a dial on a radio station and you're just shifting frequencies. And it's just, I don't know how to describe it scientifically. I just feel in my soul and know that it exists, and I'll stand by that. I could be wrong, but from what I've seen, there's no, it would take a lot to convince me that it's not real.
Hmm. Have you reconciled time travel paradox for yourself?
Um, well, what's interesting, the whole paradox effect. So I don't know. To answer your question, I haven't really not necessarily. Um, I feel like paradoxes can happen, like the butterfly effect is very real. But from what I've read and whistleblowers and people I've listened to, they have a long time ago figured out a way to time travel without creating a paradox. And that doesn't mean that it's still not affecting our timeline in some capacity, though.
Mm.
But I don't know if It, to answer your question, I don't really know.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, there is a very famous example. You make the decision, you travel back in time, kill your grandfather because he was a terrible dictator and had such a bad influence. So, meaning you kill your grandfather, meaning you will not be born, meaning you have not the opportunity to travel back. You know?
Right. Yeah, no, and I would say from what I've read, that was a theory early on that has been disproven, and through people that actually claim to be time travelers and have operated in these programs and people I've listened to. This one guy says that his parents like it didn't make sense why he's still alive because like the whole grandfather effect didn't occur for him, so he was still existing. Um, and that doesn't mean that that's the case for everyone, but I think there's a lot more to it than what we realize. Maybe that's one aspect of it, but then that's still a linear line of thinking too.
Mhm. Yeah, because that is how it works here.
Right.
Yeah.
But, like it's the Sands of Time material by Sean David Morton. That's what really got me going on this subject. But in that book, it's described, that you can't just go back in time and kill Hitler and change the timeline, right? They have to, because the consensus reality has already energized a bad guy, right? So basically, um, if you kill Hitler, something else would just take his place, equally as bad or worse. And the same thing would be carried out more or less, right? But if a million people went back in time with the understanding that our consciousness creates reality and believed in a different outcome, then you could change that outcome because a million people would be going back in time, creating a new consensus reality for the collective where it actually changes. But it's not like one singular event is going to change something because the collective already believes in something. Um, they all agreed on this at some point, whether it was with or without our consent, we create that reality for ourselves. And it takes unity. That's why we have to unite to overthrow the government. We have to all believe it. Otherwise, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And I think we also make yeah, timelines shift via our choices.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, um, yeah, if you believe in the multiple worlds theory instead
Right,
of the Copenhagen interpretation, then every single decision that you make creates a new reality. Yeah,
exactly.
that will also be lived out. And but definitely, let's say. Um, I pick something extreme, but let's say starting from tomorrow, everybody would stop taking drugs. We would wake up in a couple of weeks in a very different world.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Mm.
Is that a question? Or
No, it was more an observation, but you would agree that we ourselves shift timelines with our choices.
yeah, 100%. Like, uh, at the end of my book, I basically say choose the highest timeline every day, and that's advice sometimes I forget to take too, because this things happen that distract you, right? And I feel like we're constantly choosing timelines all day long. Every choice is a potential timeline, right? So always like choose the better outcome, the better meal, the better whatever the choice is. You know in your heart what the right thing to do is and the wrong thing to do is, and each decision has a ripple effect, and that's how you create a higher timeline for yourself, a positive timeline or the highest timeline. And we can easily throw that off by saying, you know what? I've done so good this week. I'm going to go reward myself and get drunk tonight. And then you go in and choose a lower timeline that has a whole set of effects that are going to ripple out after that. And it starts with waking up with a hangover, feeling sick. Then what happens next? You miss a meeting or whatever it was you had planned the next day. You can't go anymore because you're not feeling good. Then you decide to order a pizza instead of eat a salad, and then that pizza you're like, oh, that was good. I'm gonna order another pizza, whatever. And you just start, next thing you know, you're like on this whole other path. And you just destroyed everything that you just built for yourself. And that can be viewed in a number of ways. It doesn't have to be interpreted as a timeline, but it really is a timeline. Um, I was going to say something else. Oh, I actually had a real life experience example of this. So, of the kind of like a Mandela effect thing, and it was one that was more personal to me. But every once in a while, I like to list. I watch reaction videos on YouTube where somebody reacts to a song, like a song I like. And there's this Metallica song called All Nightmare Long. This isn't going to mean anything to you or probably a lot of people, but anyway, there was this one song that I always liked, and I was like, oh, cool, this guy's going to react to it and whatever, just passing some time. And I watched it, but the song part of the song was different. It changed. And it was my favorite part of the song. I'm a guitarist. I even liked the riff so much. I learned that guitar riff. I knew it. And when it came time for that part of the song, it was different. And I was beside myself because I'm like, no, that can't be right. So I looked at every version of the song I could find. And it was changed everywhere. Literally, I think it was just yesterday. I got into my car and I heard Michael Jackson's song Smooth Criminal. And that song had been changed in the Mandela effect. It used to say, you've been hit by, you've been struck by. Now it's you've been hit by, you've been hit by. And that's the Mandela effect. Well, when I got in my car yesterday, that song was playing and it was back to the original version. I'm like, oh my God, I haven't heard that original version since the whole Mandela effect, since it changed. And
Mm.
I'm like, wait, if that's changed back, I wonder if that Metallica song changed back. And I went and listened to the Metallica song, and it was back to the original version. And I told my friend about it, who's also a Metallica fan, and he agreed with me that it changed also. He couldn't believe it. And then he went and checked, and sure enough, it changed back. So we're talking about a timeline deviation that created this Mandela effect where a segment of a song changed, and then somehow we shifted back to where it changed back again to the original way. And it was a real life experience for me. This isn't some like weird theory. I was able to witness it, document it, And I even went back to the original reaction video where the guy was reacting to the song. And even in that song he was reacting to, it was changed back to the original. And my comment is still on the YouTube video where I'm like, does this part of this song at a minute 40 sound different to anyone else? And everyone, no one else agreed with me, but the comment's still there. So I know like I had the timestamp that it actually happened. Anyway, it felt actually rewarding and healing. Like we had been, I felt like I had shifted onto this other weird timeline where things weren't necessarily going great for me in life, and it was like these weird things were happening. And then like yesterday when I realized, first of all, the day before yesterday, that song was popping back into my head and I didn't know why. And I think it's because it changed back in my mind. I was trying to tell me that, oh, we're back on the timeline where you started, right? And I feel like that was actually a healing of that timeline. Like something shifted back and I actually feel much better now. I feel more whole. I feel like something really good happened on a collective subconscious level. But I feel like I'm back in the right lane again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a weird example to use, but it is a real example.
Mm. So, collective consciousness, interesting topic. To wrap this up, do you think, I mean, we are on a very weird trajectory right now, geopolitically, where nobody really knows where this is going to end up at the moment. Do you think we can shift that
Yeah, absolutely.
so that we don't experience more death, destruction, and what have you?
Well, I think that's up to everybody individually. I
Mm.
think like disclosure is like a mirror, right? Like everything that's happening within you, you're gonna see without, on the outside. Um, and the external is a reflection of the internal. So it really comes down to like the whole cliche thing of everybody has to go within because if you want to see that change in the world, you got to change yourself first. And you got to get your act together. And then it manifests outward. So yeah, we could do it, but everybody would have to truthfully look in the mirror and take accountability for all the bullshit, you know, and stop pointing the finger everywhere and stop pointing and blaming others for everything bad happening and just take accountability and get your life in order and start living your best life. And that's gonna blossom. That's gonna create a ripple effect that's gonna turn into a tidal wave. If everybody starts doing that, then that's how you collectively shift. It's not like we can just sit there and be like, okay, we don't want any more war. We all agree that we don't want any more war, so it's not going to happen because guess what? The internal war is still happening within us. So we got to get that taken care of first. And then that, we're always at odds with ourselves, always. So we have to find that center within, and I think that's what the whole spiritual awakening is, right? And that's what the healing journey is, and the journey to truth, all of that. I believe fundamentally that we could change the outcome and we can create a new probable timeline where there is no more death and war. But I don't know if we're quite there yet.
Yeah.
I also think that what's happening is inevitable. And I think that there's always casualties at the end of every major cycle. And we understand that death isn't real, death is an illusion. So people aren't necessarily dying, they're transitioning. And it's what we're seeing now is a byproduct of years and years of centuries of lies and manipulation and mind control. And we're seeing a byproduct of that. And we have to break free from that illusion in order to change things because we got to start seeing things clearly and seeing things for what they really are instead of seeing things the way they want us to see them.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that assessment. I agree. The work starts with us, and I don't know if we can turn it around that fast.
Right,
Uh, we are pretty far down the line, and yeah, let's hope for the best.
right.
And yeah, we should all participate in this inner work. So thank you so much for coming. Was a pleasure talking to you, and
Yeah,
I hope you will come back.
Yeah, of course. I would love to. This was a lot of fun and I really appreciate it. I love your energy. I love the cat that's hanging out. Um, and I will say, if anybody's interested in following us, you can go to our website, journeytotruth.online, and that has everything we do. You can just go there, find our conferences, our books. My book can also be found on Amazon, Bleed Through Tales from Another Timeline. I don't have a copy with me here to show, but just type in Bleed Through, one word on Amazon, and you'll find it. But journeytotruth.online, that's our website, and you can find everything we do there. And I would say that's the best way to follow us. And thank you again for
And
having
I
me
will
on.
put it all in the description box.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so guys, that was it. Night flight for today with Tyler Kiwala, and we see you on the next one.